Good morning, ball watchers. Just Jake today, back for a recap of City's final match against Minnesota United of the 2024 season. And guys, not a great one. And it hurts even more having to do this one by myself and at 6:30 or 6:40 on a Sunday morning. Hope everything's going well for my early risers out there. And kudos to you. Uh, Not a fun night watching that game and then getting up and doing this prep and making sure that we have the right takeaways here, but I'm going to give it a try. So let's talk a little bit about the match last night. And I want to get a little more big picture as we move into the final piece of the show. It'll be a shorter one here, but last night we saw an 11 of Berkey, Horn, Nilsson, Kessler, Tolan, which was the same, back five with Berkey that I think most people would have pictured. That's your best available right now. And then we saw Leuven maintain his spot. Durkin did not make even the travel team. Sounds like they wanted to shut him down just to be ultra conservative. No use in risking any further injury in the last match of the season when there's nothing to play for. So Watts comes in and holds that position. Then we had on our kind of next two was Hartel and Toyshirt. So imagine these two, playing obviously ahead of the two that play out of the back four, which is Lubin and Watts. And in a lot of systems, I feel like you'd expect those two to have maybe some sort of width on the ball. With our formations, I think what happens is Toy Shirt likes to join up with the front three sometimes, and he will give you some width on the right. But in terms of running up and down the right, that's not really what you get from a player like Cedric Toyshirt. But Hartel, you could see also last night, obviously he's advanced on the chart, but due to our ball progression, I think issues last night, you saw him dropping deeper and deeper back as well to help progress and help us break lines and keep moving forward. And then up top, you saw the same, starting pairing that I think we wanted to see with Betcher and Klaus coming back together. I think it's a mix of two things there. One is Betcher is in some fine form right now, and you got to give credit where credit's due. You got to hand him starts like this. And then for a guy like Klaus, you want him to find some form in, for all intents and purposes, what's been a pretty disappointing season for him. Injury aside, obviously that's been a big thing as well, but just not a great production year for Joao Klaus. But I want to talk about a little bit what happened to me in the first half and then get into the second half and then sort of bigger picture stuff as we go. But first half, got some early Henry Kessler drama on a potential PK, was reviewed by VAR. How I view that one is the ball's over the top and bouncing, and he and the attacker are both kind of on even ground in terms of staying even with each other. And they make contact that's very mutual, like shoulder to shoulder. And the way that Kessler's body contorts after the contact kind of spins him around and has his legs hit out the underside of the Minnesota attacker, which causes him to go down. And take the initial contact away, to me, that's an absolute penalty. But I think given that earlier contact probably justifies that call. And when the call in the field was not a call, and they just took a look, after the first stoppage, I feel like it's usually pretty hard to go back and change, but he was called the monitor, which I do say also makes it pretty frequent to change. So that was, hopeful definitely for me as we were getting on the game started that we didn't have an early PK against us there. But overall, what I was noticing was, we were trying to progress forward. We had a lot of possession, and especially in the first half, but a lot of meaningless possession where you do knock it around. You might get past half field a little bit, but once you get there, either you send it into a forward who might cough up the ball or make an errant pass. And Minnesota was taking that ball and just going north immediately with numbers. And they had such high danger on those opportunities. Every time they went forward, I had a thought they might score because it did look like that. Versus us, every time we had the ability to move forward, it didn't feel that way. So big difference in the two teams in the very early part of the game. We did have a really good chance with a Betcher Klaus 1-2 back to Betcher for a cutback, but no one was close enough for that cross. Berkey had a huge save in the kind of right before the first half of the first half, where Rosales got a free ball in the box on a 1-2 and just ripped it near post. Berkey had a great strong save, bottom hand save to make that one. And then Klaus tried to go break his scoring drought that I just referenced already earlier in the show here and go for a 60-yard bomb. And when you're going for those, I know a lot of players do go for those because goalies do play a little bit higher off their lines in this modern game. You got to be really confident. You know, you're going to have a good chance there, Klaus, buddy. And I don't think that was the time for it, but to me, it kind of signaled maybe just an overall frustration with the attack so far. And a couple minutes later, Minnesota finds the net. And it's a goal that's worked through Yeboah, who plays behind to Load, who's usually, reverse role, the guy that's supplying the ball. And this was a theme for the night for me. Balls behind our back two and just our back four in general, but our center backs especially, they just don't have the recovery pace for those. So when teams are going to play us behind, they're going to have some, level of success because we don't have the most Rolls Royce athletic center backs. Both of ours, I'd say, are very technical and they play very specific roles and they're good, but they're not very fast. So when you do come up against teams that do like to put through balls in behind, you've got to have a goalkeeper that's playing high off his line. You've got to have center backs that, for as technically great as they are, they've got to have great positioning and good recovery speed enough to make a good challenge if they have to. And then fullbacks that make up for that pace. So obviously what happens is Load gets in behind. Nilsson tries to catch up, tries to grab him, throw him off a little bit, but he finishes near post. Not much that I think Berkey can do about that. And to me, that was where Minnesota found a lot of their attack the rest of the evening. It's just balls in behind, just really causing problems for our back line. In the 25th, Toyshirt, I think ended up being probably our closest attempt of the night to a goal. Toyshirt hit a curl shot cross, where he's pretty deep outside the box, but he hits this and it forces St. Clair sprawling across his box, the goalkeeper for Minnesota, and we rung the back post. And when that is your best chance, a very speculative cross shot, whatever you want to call it, rings the post. It's going to be a long night, when that is your best chance of scoring in a game that you want to prove something on, but again, nothing to play for off the back of it right now. The final thing I wanted to say on specifics of the first half was one of the highlights for me was nothing related to scoring goals, but Berkey had an incredible side volley punt laced up the left channel to Hartel into his path to generate an attack. Nothing came of it, of course, but my word, he's had a couple of these this season where he just has no right to make them, but he did. It was incredible. I'm going to get that video out and make sure everyone sees what I'm talking about, but it was incredible. Overall, first half, pretty disappointing if you're a City fan, right? You're down 1-0 heading into this. You've got pretty much nothing to show you that we have a fluid attack to challenge and equalize potentially. Basically, the two avenues that I painted were Hartel is either spraying in deep crosses and we're looking for second ball, knockdowns, or we push Horn and Totland up and kind of sit Leuven and Watts back and kind of cross in from there. But the directness wasn't really there for me last night. And we went direct, right? Like we went direct to our forwards to try to see if we could hold the ball or lay it off. And we're pretty reliant on that as an avenue. But to me, it's then cut it back outside and then see if we can cross the ball from a deep cross. Because we do have some bigger bodies, of course, but it's not very fun to watch, and when it's not working, it's not working. And Minnesota was very prepared for that game plan. Just a little sip of the water and a little time to reflect as we head in the second half for you all, and that is that Leuven had an incredible ball right off the bat to Totland, who laid it off and got slotted back in, and the cut back to Klaus was connected, but Klaus's shot got blocked. That was a good little sequence to start off the second half and show Minnesota we're not going to go away. And I think in the beginning, you did feel that way, right? I think we definitely came out with a little more fire in the second half. It didn't obviously lead to too much besides I'll get to our goal. But we also had some good buildup in the 61st minute. The buildup between the team and the linkage and the way that we were playing quick and tight and, tight window passes that were with precision enough that we could one-time them or lead players where we could. I want to get a picture a video of that and be able to put that out to you all and show you this team has moments, right? We have moments where you see it. You see the finished product, or at least a lot closer to the finished product, and you see what I think Hack is trying to build to in training. But the way the team is set up, I don't think it lends itself to that, and I'll talk about that a little more towards the end here, but, we did get a Klaus shot on goal in the 70th minute after Leuven pinged it across the field to Totland, again, and Totland cuts back for Klaus. We made our first subs shortly after that with Teuscher and Watts coming off for Alm and Thor, who you'd expect to play more of that winger type role, get a little chalk in their boots, get a little more width in the team. I honestly didn't see that even after the substitution. And we didn't really get a chance to because a minute later we conceded again with Minnesota getting their second goal of the night as a long ball was brought down, was played behind, and squared across the six for a finish. It's basically the exact same as the fourth goal as well. There was a lot of those, long ball in, brought down, played behind. We can't keep up. The cross in, troubles our defenders, and they usually have a pretty easy tap in at the back post. So that was unfortunate to concede again like that. Again, beat for pace to the line, squared across. Our last ditch defending wasn't there. Guys weren't tight enough on their marks, and they get an easy goal. In the 74th minute, we responded finally to make it 2-1. And this goal, it's not as much a team goal as it is just a couple of strong bits of play from two players, and I want to call them out. So Hartel made an incredible, incisive through ball to Klaus, just threading the needle between a couple different players. Klaus, for his credit, when you're on the kind of half space on the left side, so kind of think about not on the far left, but not at the center circle, but kind of like right in the middle of those two, which is kind of the left half space, I would call it. He took two great touches to close the gap between him and the goal, but also kind of cut off his defenders as well. So kind of think of like diagonal touches towards the center of the net to cut off players and bring yourself closer to the net. So what he does then is just look up, took those few strong touches, and cut it back for Hartel for a nice one-time finish. Was not a tap in. Hartel still had some work to do, but had a great confident finish there. And those, again, moments when you have good players can do things like that for the most part solo and kind of out of nowhere in good moments when you catch them. So it's two things for me. It's one, shows you and demonstrates to you that we're pretty reliant at this point on someone stepping up to the plate and usually bringing some great form of solo play to get on the board here. And two, again, it just highlights the disparity that we have as a team right now. We're just not creating fluidly through who is on the pitch as a team. It was all for naught, of course, as Minnesota scored two more goals in the 78th and 83rd, one off of a corner kick that was finished near post by none other than our own Kessler. I think what happened there was it was a near post, driven corner, and Klaus was the header right before Kessler, and then Klaus was so close to it, and I think Kessler thought it was going to be headed out by the time that it got to him, so he might have tweaked his head position just a little bit, and enough where Klaus didn't get any piece of it, and Kessler's header sent it into the back of our net, which is very unfortunate. Little own goal there. And then the 83rd minute, they drove straight up the middle, up our spine, sent it in behind, and another cutback perfectly out of Kessler's reach as he's sliding to break it up, and it's back post for a tap in. That was a tough one. I made a video in the very beginning of the day to remind everyone, and it's still very important to me that I wanted to watch that game and just feel a little bit free of all of the things that have bound us this season, all of the suffering that we've had as a team, as fans, just in this downspin of form compared to last year. But when your team puts on a performance like that, where I saw Hack in the press conference talking about it wasn't the effort was there, and I'm not saying it was a lackadaisical performance, but it wasn't a great performance. I'm not gonna lie to anyone here. And when you go down and you want to win, you usually fight your tail off to prove that, and or you change things tactically to do that. And we just didn't have it last night. And this isn't the first time in the season. It's in fact many a time that when we come out and we get slapped first, it's awful in terms of how we respond to it. Usually it's just a lot more of the same, and we'll just try to shove it down your throat even more. And to me, that just doesn't work. And last night was just another example in that column for me. Now, I will pivot to be more positive and say I just talked about the man, but I mean, heart and soul of the team, you've got to be going at Hartel. I don't know who else in their right mind would pick anyone else. He is a difference maker on the pitch for us, one that I would say that we've never had, but certainly one that when games are going like this, and let's just say we do have the offseason, we make some changes to the roster, we kind of crystallize the guys that are there, and they get more comfortable playing together. We find our formation, our tactics, all that assumption, which would be great. Hartel still will, there will be games like this where you will need him to have moments of excellence. And that's what you get him for. Like, he fits our system well, and he will drive creation for the system, but he will also just drive things for himself, which in turn will help us as well. You've got to have good teams have game breakers, guys that can grab the game by themselves and change results based on that. So in this game, you've got to have one. And I do really think every game week that keeps going by, he's got output. He shows you what he's made of from a production standpoint. And he also shows you what he's made of from just a teammate perspective. You see some of the leadership out there as well, which I like about him. So he is definitely my heart and soul of the team. Didn't generate a ton last night, but he did get his one of two shots on goal. It was able to convert it. And I feel like going forward, the game plan was to look for him, and he would try to bring us to the promised land. Leuven, I think, did his best as well. He's a close behind for me. Oh, he had 27 passes into the final third. You can feel him pushing us forward. But again, it's just not enough, opportunities for him to find that last ball. The runs aren't being made, or we're not getting that second ball. And it just, I guess last night to me it sucked because it was a bunch of the same frustrations we've had all season. And even pre-Carnell's firing to me. So unfortunate, I will say. Before I go into how we did the predictions and Grahammers, do want to give out a final shout out to our friends at Hoffman Brothers, keeping us alive here at this point at the Koenig house. We are going to have our friend Carter from Hoffman Brothers out here shortly for a little checkup on the heating, as the furnace did flip on for the first time this week for us. I'm sure it flipped on for you all as well. We're having some chilly mornings out here in St. Louis. So make sure that before you get that flipped on, or even if you already have, it's not too late. Let's get that checked out. Let's see what the lifetime is on that. Let's see how much life we have left in it. Let's see if it needs any tender love and care before we head into the real meat of the latter part of fall and winter coming up shortly. So make sure you give our friends Hoffman Brothers a call at 314-664-3011 or visit them online at hoffmanbros.com. Predictions and Grahammers for us for this one. Justin and I both predicted draws. I predicted 1-1, and he predicted 2-2. I predicted for my bet, which just fell at the very end of that match. It was hurtful for me. Both teams to score on the under 4.5. Obviously did not hit because Minnesota scored 4 goals to NR1. So there was 5 goals in the game. And Justin had City double chance, which frankly never even looked like we had a shot on that one. So not a good night for the boys to finish off on here as we both end the season with a loss. I do end up positive on the net, though. Justin did go negative. I'm sure that's going to hurt him personally, and he'll come back better than ever next year. But that was the final that we had there. And my thing I wanted to talk about is 2 things. One's formation and one's coaching, and they both lean into each other. When you're playing a 4-2-2-2, which is really what we were last night, and you have those players on the field, I'm not sure I had one thing that I could say about Marcel Toy. I mean, sorry, not Marcel. I'm not going to bash Hartel. I'm not going to bash Cedric Toyshirt either, but I will say I do not remember a sequence that he was involved in last night. Not one. And when you have a player of his caliber who's been scoring goals like he has, you've got to find service for him. And I think it adds more evidence to my point, maybe from a couple of weeks ago now, where Toyshirt in this system doesn't add much in possession moving forward. And I think playing a 4-2-2-2 is a huge disservice to a player like him. He's just absent in my mind. But You noticed it last night. I think that's why he comes out at the 71st minute. It's just not much going on for him. He had 40 touches on the ball, 3 passes in the final third. He was taken off the ball twice. It's not a game that you want him in that position. You want him more advanced. And I know that you really want to play Klaus into shape. I get it. And you want to reward Betcher. I get that as well. But one of those players in my mind should be Cedric Toyshirt. And him playing more a little deeper position with Hartel makes no sense to me. So I don't like this formation. Every one of our players out there. So Betcher and Klaus will rotate. One goes forward, makes runs in behind. One kind of drops in and looks for the ball to receive and hold. For Hartel, he's a guy that can make dangerous runs, but he can also just drop a little bit deeper, look for the ball, and kind of play a Leuven role sometimes. Maybe when Leuven's locked up. And Toyshirt again gets lost in that mix for me. Leuven and Watts is really just there for cover and the occasional back pass from what I see in the system. Doesn't really add much else to that. Leuven will look to get the ball, turn, look forward, assess options, and move us and progress and break lines. But what you don't hear out of my mouth again is width. Minnesota was prepared to handle the challenges in the middle of the field last night in the spine. They were prepared to be physical in the middle and make sure that they bumped us off of balls and challenged and 1 second balls. We were not prepared to alternate or to customize our game plan based on what we were seeing in the field. It felt like we were lost. It felt like we didn't have a plan B. And that's been a case a lot of the season. And when I say that a lot, that makes me think about coaching. And I like John Hackworth. I think overall, if you look at his tenure since he took over as interim coach for Cardinal, he didn't, necessarily inherit a good situation, but he did inherit some great quality players coming in. And when they look at him this season to assess, because he's in the mix for the future first team head coach, named, no interim tag. You do want to do your best to try to untether his performance with the influx of talent that he received as well. But that's so hard to do. And I think to his credit, he helped in with culture. People love him. He's clearly brought some better vibes back to the club, back to the locker room that we weren't seeing before. But again, to me, besides the new players, and I think definitely a nuance, a different way of playing, more possession that we're used to, but defensively, we still look very frail and we look lost when our game plan isn't working and we're not set up initially the right way, which is okay. Sometimes teams will throw different things at you. You do need to be able to transition and to find different ways to break down teams and to hurt teams. We didn't do that. And we haven't been able to do that even since he took over. And that to me is a sign of, what I would say maybe an inexperienced manager in the game, which he is for the most part. He's not inexperienced in the game. He's been in the game for his whole life, and that's a lot to show for it. But I think it just further to me backs up the point that, and maybe to a lot of City fans who are feeling the same way, is we probably just need a new face on the touchline for the coach. And again, I would love to keep Hackworth with the overall organization in his role, but I just don't think that he has shown us that he is fully prepared for the head coach tag without the interim part of it. It's just someone needs to inspire confidence. The locker room looks to be fixed. That's great. Now that's always going to be work that you have on your plate. It's got to be maintenance constantly. But that's just one part of it for me. You got to get the best out of your players and make your team dynamic in many different ways, not just the way they're used to playing. Because again, there's going to be so many games next year I can imagine where they'll be ugly, but you have to find a way forward. And last night we weren't able to find a way forward in a lot of time. So yeah, I'm frustrated this morning, definitely with the end of the result. It kind of feels like a maybe somewhat deserved ending for the season for us, and just reminds us that we have a lot of work to do here. We have some great things to take into the offseason from these last couple of weeks, but there's still a lot of road to travel with St. Louis City. And I think some of it will be done with the roster, some minor changes here and there, maybe a splash, over the coming months in the offseason. I think the coaching search will lend a lot of that. But I think time spent together in offseason, in training, really working to identify ourselves as a team, who we want to be, and also who we can be in certain situations. Can we switch to, a 4-3-3? Can we, in a game where our game plan isn't working, throw on a body that changes our style and we do something different? Those things, can we challenge teams and make them react to us, not just the other way around? Because it feels like that right now. So those two things for me are going to be really important. One is finding our formation where we fit our best players in and we look good, we look fluid, we look dynamic. And I think a coach is that second piece, but it makes the first piece happen. So I'm probably not, putting my or casting my ballot this year for Hackworth to shed that interim tag. I do thank him for getting us through this and not, bleeding out even more like we were when he took over. But I think it's time for some change at the club. I think and I hope that they realize the same thing. Hopefully you all do too. I'm curious. I'm open to all thoughts and opinions on this, but I think it's time for Hack to go from the head coach position. And I do think we need to go for someone that has some experience, that is shown to be, flexible in their dynamic and how they set up the team, and someone that has hopefully some MLS experience as well. It's a tough league and long season to play in. And we can do this, guys. I mean, other teams have had bad seasons like this and come back way stronger, and vice versa. Like we had the season where you were really good, and then the next season you just dropped off the face of the earth. So things like this happen all the time, and I want us to be an example, next year of a team that things just went wrong. You know what? But we figured it out. We addressed it. We filled gaps. We brought in a new coach, and we fixed it. And next year, I'm not saying we should be challenging for the MLS Cup, but we should be a lock in the playoffs. You know what I mean? There's no reason that teams like Austin and Dallas right now were pushing yesterday in decision day potentially for a spot. And sorry, yeah, I mean Austin, Dallas pushing basically to the last 2 weeks on a spot, and Portland, Vancouver, Colorado, even Minnesota. These are teams we can challenge. We can absolutely challenge. We can challenge, Salt Lake and Seattle too on any given day. But my point is that playoffs again need to be the goal next year. There is no excuse for not making the playoffs in MLS. No excuse. It's the easiest league that I think I can think of. I think NHL is probably a close second, if not at least tied for making the playoffs. You have to make it. It's harder not to make it. And we need to be back in the playoffs next season. There is no excuses. October, November should have soccer in St. Louis. We deserve it. This team is at least now built from a dollar standpoint to support it. We need to make sure now that we fill in the gaps, fill in the cracks, get the boys together, all clicking in the offseason, get a coach in there that is going to inspire this team and make this team dangerous and harmful to other teams again. And that's what I'm asking for. It may sound like a Christmas gift to Santa, but that is really what I'm asking for over the offseason. And we're going to be here keeping you updated all through the offseason on how that's going and what we believe in it so far. So stay tuned as we enter the off season here. We'll probably shift off of a 2 times a week episode for you all and shift into more of a one where you can get all of your news in one-stop shop, in terms of City 2, maybe in terms of transfers, in terms of, the expansion draft coming up with San Diego entering and who might be exposed, who might not be. We'll be doing all that content for you all. So in the off season, when you have ideas, shoot them to us. DM on Instagram, on X, whatever, and make sure you let us know and we can work them into our shows. We always try to do that for all of our listeners. And just one final time, obviously, for the recaps this season, this is the last one, but thank you all so much for being a part of our journey this season. I know it's been filled with tons of ups and downs, hopefully more ups next season, but for all of you that have stuck with us, thank you. A wholehearted thank you on mine and Justin's behalf. It's been a long season. And I think we have a lot to learn and a lot to be optimistic about moving forward. So we will definitely carry a bit of hopium into the future for St. Louis City. So with that, if you want to show any appreciation to us, please do. If you're on YouTube, hit us up with a like or subscribe. And if you're on Apple and Spotify and Amazon, all the podcast domains, rate us, review us. We love a good 5 stars. That never hurts, of course. So thank you all again for a great season. We'll be in touch here shortly on another episode to give you some updates on how things went with all the decision day drama, as well as City 2, who I want to give a shout out to at the end here as they take on LAFC2 today in playoff soccer in St. Louis at City Park. So if you're not doing anything this Sunday, right now, today, 2 p.m. is City 2 in the playoffs in a matchup where they picked LAFC2. So they do want to win this one at home, give the fans a little bit of a taste of playoff soccer that our first team couldn't. And that's for $13 right now on SeatGeek. So go get your tickets if you're not doing anything today and make sure you support the boys in City Red, but it's just City 2. So go City 2, all support for the boys as they head into this match. And hopefully we keep moving and show St. Louis that we do care and that we do want to bring playoff soccer back here and we deserve it. So thank you all for tuning in today. Appreciate y'all. And we'll be back with another episode here shortly. Have a great rest of your weekend and week. And in the meantime, we're all for City.